The house sat on a corner lot in a neighborhood my mother had spent 30 years pretending she deserved. Oak trees lined the street, their roots cracking the sidewalks in patterns that looked like slow-motion lightning. The paint was sage green, my mother's choice, selected from a magazine spread about coastal grandmother aesthetics, even though we lived 300 miles from any coast. The porch swing creaked in the October wind, a sound I'd learned to associate with her voice. Constant, performative, demanding attention without offering comfort. I'd bought the house 3 years ago. Signed the papers at a title company in a strip mall between a dry cleaner and a payday loan office, the kind of place where no one asked questions and no one remembered faces. The seller was motivated. A divorce, a deadline, a desperation that matched my own need for secrecy. I paid cash. Not my cash, technically, but the bank's. A mortgage in my name alone. A monthly payment I made from an account my mother didn't know existed. She thought she was renting. That was the fiction I'd constructed, piece by piece, with the patience of a woman who'd spent her entire life being underestimated. My mother, Patricia Ann Holloway, 60 years old, widowed at 52, professionally disappointed, had been looking for a place to downsize after my father's death. The family home was too big, too empty, too full of memories that didn't include the affair she'd never forgiven him for, the affair that had produced the son she loved more than me. I'd found the listing, sent her the link. Look at this one, Mom. Perfect location. Great schools. Schools I didn't need, wouldn't use, had no intention of ever needing. But my mother collected amenities like trophies, listed them to friends like proof of her discernment. And the landlord is flexible, willing to work with tenants. The landlord was me, a LLC I'd created with a lawyer who charged by the hour and forgot faces. The lease was standard, downloaded from a legal website, filled in with terms that seemed generous. Below market rent, included utilities, no credit check required. My mother had signed without reading. She never read documents she considered beneath her attention. The lease was between Patricia Holloway and Holloway Properties, LLC. The name similarity made her feel important, made her feel chosen. She didn't know that Holloway Properties was wholly owned by Eleanor Vance, by me, by the daughter she'd spent 32 years calling practical, in a tone that meant disappointing, responsible, in a tone that meant boring, reliable, in a tone that meant exploitable. For 3 years, she'd lived in my house, paid my mortgage with what she thought was rent, decorated my walls with her taste, her choices, her curated collection of inoffensive watercolor prints and inspirational quotes framed in distressed wood. Live, Laugh, Love hung in the hallway. I'd seen it 100 times, wanted to burn it 100 times, smiled and said cute every time she pointed it out. She'd hosted Thanksgiving in my dining room, Christmas Eve in my living room, Easter brunch on my patio, the one I'd paid to resurface, the one she told guests she'd had done, as if contractors appeared at her whim without invoices or oversight. She'd entertained her book club in my kitchen, served them wine from my cellar. A cellar she'd discovered 6 months in. A cellar she'd stocked with bottles charged to the house account that was actually my credit card. She'd never asked how I afforded the rent on my apartment. Never wondered why I lived in a studio with a Murphy bed and a hot plate while she occupied 3,000 square feet of hardwood and granite. Never questioned the narrative that suited her. That I was struggling, that I was saving, that I was being smart, while she enjoyed the fruits of her widowhood. The fruits were mine. Every peach, every plum, every carefully selected organic vegetable from the CSA box that arrived weekly, charged to my account, consumed by her friends while they discussed novels they hadn't finished. I'd documented everything. The lease, the payments, the utility bills in my name, routed through a P.O. box she didn't know about. The property tax records, the insurance policy, the maintenance contracts with plumbers and electricians and landscapers who called me Ms. Vance and called her the tenant. I'd saved receipts, bank statements, emails where she complained about the landlord, me, always me, the invisible infrastructure of her comfort. I told myself I was waiting for the right moment. The moment when she'd understand, finally and completely, that her life rested on foundations she'd never built. That her comfort was borrowed, her status leased, her security a fiction I'd authored and could end at will. But the truth was simpler. I was afraid. Afraid that confrontation would mean losing the only relationship I had, however toxic, however one-sided, however much it resembled a transaction between a landlord and a tenant who'd forgotten she wasn't the owner. That fear ended on a Tuesday in October. The Tuesday before my mother's 60th birthday. The Tuesday I found the text messages. I wasn't snooping. That was the defense I prepared, the justification I rehearsed, though I knew I didn't need one. The phone was mine, an old device I'd lent her when hers broke. A temporary solution that had become permanent because she forgot to replace it. Because, you're not using it anyway, Eleanor. Don't be petty. I'd taken it to the Apple store for a battery replacement, and the technician had asked if I wanted the data transferred, and I'd said yes without thinking. And then I'd been sitting in my studio apartment, on my Murphy bed, scrolling through photos to delete before donating the device, and I'd found the messages. Not photos. Texts. iCloud backup. Automatic. Comprehensive. Every conversation she'd had on that phone for 18 months. Most were mundane. Book club drama, cousin grievances, the endless negotiation of her social calendar. But one thread, one name, caught my attention. Mark, my brother, the golden child, the affair baby, the son my mother loved with a ferocity that made my own existence feel like an apology. The messages were recent, 3 days old. Mark, don't worry about the house. It's practically yours already. I'm adding you to the deed next month. Eleanor doesn't need to know. She never comes around anyway, and when she does, she just mopes. The house is your inheritance, sweetheart. Your sister can have the china. No one wants it anyway. I read it 3 times. 4. 5. Each reading deeper. Each word more precise. Each implication more devastating. She was giving him the house. My house. The house I'd bought, paid for, maintained, hidden. She was adding him to the deed. A legal impossibility since she wasn't on the deed herself. But she didn't know that. She thought she was the owner. Thought her name on a lease she'd never read made her the queen of a castle she'd never built. And I was moping. The word she'd used for my entire childhood, my adolescence, my adulthood. The word that transformed my silence into pathology, my observation into depression, my survival strategy into a character flaw. Eleanor mopes. Eleanor is moody. Eleanor never learned to be happy. I don't know what's wrong with her. What was wrong with me was simple. I saw her. Really saw her. The performance, the calculation, the way she extracted love without offering it, demanded presence without providing safety, required gratitude while delivering contempt. I saw her, and I couldn't unsee her, and that clarity was a burden she called moping. But now I had proof. Not just of her contempt, but of her intent. She was planning to steal from me. Not knowingly, perhaps, but effectively. She was going to promise my brother an inheritance she didn't own, create expectations she couldn't fulfill, and leave me to clean up the mess when the truth emerged. Unless I stopped her. Unless I controlled the narrative. Unless I chose the moment of revelation rather than waiting for it to choose me. I spent the next 3 days planning. Not frantically, methodically, the way I'd planned everything in my life that mattered. The birthday party she'd already announced, the intimate gathering of 40 friends at her home, the speech she'd prepared according to her texts to Mark, about the next chapter, the golden years, the legacy I'm building for my children. The legacy was mine. The house was mine. The next chapter would be written by me. I ordered a cake from the bakery she preferred, the one that charged $400 for fondant flowers. I hired a photographer. For memories, Mom, you deserve to be documented. Who was actually a videographer, who would record everything. I bought a dress in her favorite color, aubergine, the shade she said brought out my eyes, though her eyes were brown and the dress made her look sallow, and I prepared the documents, the deed, the lease, the payment history, the LLC operating agreement, the bank statements showing every rent check deposited into my account, the property tax records, the insurance policy, the maintenance invoices, everything, organized, labeled, undeniable. I didn't sleep the night before. Sat in my studio, on my Murphy bed, and watched the numbers on my phone change from 11:59 to 1200, from Monday to Tuesday, from anticipation to action. The house was 3 miles away. I'd driven it 1,000 times, always as visitor, always as daughter, always as the practical one who moped while her mother lived in splendor. Tonight, I would drive, as owner. The party started at 7 p.m. I arrived at 6:45, early as always, punctuality beaten into me by a mother who considered lateness a moral failing, even as she arrived fashionably late to everything she attended. The house was transformed. Her transformation, her taste, her curated aesthetic of effortless elegance that had taken 3 days and $2,000 of my money to achieve. 40 people. Her book club, her yoga group, her dearest friends who'd known me since childhood and never learned my name without prompting. They milled through my living room, drank my wine, admired my walls while discussing their own renovations, their own acquisitions, their own carefully constructed illusions of success. I circulated, smiled, accepted cheek kisses from women who smelled like expensive perfume and unexamined lives, listened to stories about children I didn't know, vacations I couldn't afford, achievements that had required no sacrifice because they'd never been asked to sacrifice. My mother appeared at 7:15, descending the stairs in a dress that cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, the mortgage she thought was her rent. She glowed, literally glowed, with the satisfaction of a woman who believed she'd earned every moment of her comfort. "Eleanor!" The voice carried, projected, designed to reach every corner of the room. "You came, and early, as always. So predictable, my practical girl." Predictable, practical. The words that defined my cage, that transformed my reliability into a limitation, my consistency into a flaw. "I wouldn't miss it, Mom. 60 is important." "Isn't it?" She touched her hair, the highlights I'd paid for, the style I'd tipped for. "I feel like I'm just beginning, like the best years are ahead." Mark agrees. He says I'm more vibrant than ever. Mark. The name landed like a stone. I looked around, found him in the corner, holding a glass of my wine, talking to a woman old enough to be his mother but pretty enough to be his type. He caught my eye, smiled, the easy charm of a man who'd never been told no, who'd inherited his father's looks and his mother's entitlement, and considered both achievements. "Mark's here," I said. "How nice. Isn't it? He flew in special. Such a good son." She touched my arm, the gesture intimate and condescending. "Not that you're not good, Eleanor. In your way. Your practical way." The speech began at 8:30. My mother at the center of the room, my staircase behind her, my chandelier illuminating her, my wine giving her courage. She spoke of legacy, of family, of the home I've built, the life I've created, the future I'm securing for those I love. She didn't mention me, not directly. I was both my children, lumped together, my practical reliability serving as contrast to Mark's vibrant charm. I was the foundation, invisible, necessary, taken completely for granted. "And now," she concluded, her voice gaining the tremor of practiced emotion, "my daughter has a surprise. Don't you, Eleanor?" I did. The moment I'd planned, rehearsed, dreamed of for 3 years. I stepped forward, into the light, into the center of the room that had always been hers. "I do, Mom." My voice was steady. I'd practiced in mirrors, in cars, in the shower at 5 a.m. when the building was silent. "It's something I've been working on for a long time. Something I think you'll appreciate." I reached into my bag, pulled out the box. Small, velvet. The kind that suggested jewelry, luxury, the kind of gift she'd expect from a daughter trying to compensate for her own insufficiency. She opened it. The key gleamed, gold-plated, unnecessary. The locks had been changed 3 months ago. Smart locks I controlled from my phone, but symbolic. Powerful. The key to a kingdom she thought she ruled. The house, I said. I wanted you to have this. Officially. The key to your home. The room applauded. My mother beamed, the expression of a woman receiving her due, her entitlement confirmed, her status validated. She held up the key, displayed it, turned it in the light so everyone could see. Thank you, Eleanor. So practical. So, she searched for the word, found it, deployed it. So you. So me. The final reduction, the complete dismissal. I was practical. I was so me. I was never enough, never right, never the daughter she wanted, only the daughter she got, the daughter she used, the daughter she forgot when someone better was available. Mom, I said. My voice still steady, still calm. The voice of a woman who'd spent 3 years preparing for this moment, who'd documented everything, who'd built a fortress of evidence while her mother decorated the walls with inspirational quotes. Before you put that away, there's something else. Something I need to tell you. Something everyone here needs to understand. The room quieted. Not completely. A few conversations continued at the edges, people too drunk or too self-absorbed to notice the shift in atmosphere. But the center held. 40 faces turned toward me, curious, expectant, waiting for the practical daughter's predictable speech. This house, I said. This home you've lived in for 3 years. The home you've decorated, celebrated, called your own. I bought it. In 2021. Paid the down payment, secured the mortgage, signed the deed. My name only. Eleanor Vance. Not Holloway. Not your daughter's name, not the name you gave me, but the name I chose for myself when I realized that being your daughter meant being less than I could be. My mother's smile flickered. The key in her hand suddenly looked different. Less like a gift and more like evidence. The rent you've paid, I continued. Every month, on time, so responsible, so practical. It went to me. To my account. To pay my mortgage on my property. The utilities you included in the lease, my name on the bills, routed through a P.O. box you didn't know existed. The maintenance, the repairs, the landlord you complained about when the garbage disposal broke, that was me. Always me. The invisible infrastructure of your comfort. I pulled out the folder, the one I'd prepared, organized, made undeniable. Held it up for the room to see. The deed. The lease. 3 years of payment history. The LLC that owns this property. Holloway Properties. A name you found flattering, a name that made you feel important. It's mine. All of it. Has been, from the first day you moved in, from the first night you hosted your book club in my kitchen, from the first Thanksgiving where you told everyone how blessed you were to have found this place. My mother's face had gone pale. The key in her hand dropped to the floor, a small sound swallowed by the silence of 40 people holding their breath. You called me practical, I said. You called me reliable. You called me nobody. In 1,000 small ways, 1,000 cutting remarks, 1,000 moments where Mark was the star and I was the stagehand, and I let you. Because I was building something. Something you couldn't see, couldn't understand, couldn't take away. I was building proof. That I existed. That I mattered. That I was more than the daughter you dismissed, more than the practical girl who moped while you lived in splendor. I stepped closer. Close enough to smell her perfume, the one I'd bought her for Christmas, charged to the account she thought was household expenses. And now, I said, I have a choice to make. The choice you've always made for me, the choice to be grateful, to be silent, to accept your definition of who I am. But tonight, on your 60th birthday, in your... I laughed, the sound sharp and final. In my house, I'm making a different choice. I reached down, picked up the key, held it in my palm, the gold catching the light from my chandelier. This key, I said. It's not a gift. It's a symbol of everything you took for granted, everything you assumed was yours because you wanted it, because you performed ownership, because you never questioned the foundations of your comfort. And now, I closed my fist around the key, felt its edges press into my skin. Now I'm taking it back. Eleanor, my mother whispered. The name sounded strange, foreign, the name of someone she didn't recognize. You can't. This is my home, my life. Your home? I repeated. Your life? Built on what, Mom? On my money? My labor? My silence while you took credit for everything I provided? I turned to the room, to the 40 faces, the book club and yoga group and dearest friends who'd watched my humiliation for decades and called it entertainment. She told Mark the house would be his, I said. Last week. Texted him that she was adding him to the deed. A deed she doesn't hold on a house she doesn't own, making promises she has no right to make. Because that's what she does. That's what she's always done. Promised things that weren't hers to give. Taken things that weren't hers to take. Made me feel small, so she could feel big. I pulled out my phone, swiped to the screenshot, held it up. Here. Her words. The house is practically yours already. Eleanor doesn't need to know. Because I'm nobody. I'm practical. I'm the reliable daughter who pays for everything and deserves nothing. The room was frozen. Mark had stepped forward, his face a mask of confusion and dawning horror. He looked at my mother, at me, at the phone with her words displayed for everyone to see. Mom? His voice was small, younger than I'd heard it in years. Is that true? The house? It's not yours? My mother said nothing. For the first time in my memory, Patricia Ann Holloway had no words, no performance, no deflection, no cutting remark to transform someone else's pain into her own advantage. It's Ellie's, I answered for her. Has been, always was, from the day she moved in. And the rent you've both enjoyed discussing, the landlord you've both complained about. That was me. Paying myself effectively, while you lived in a house you didn't earn and made plans for an inheritance you didn't own. I turned back to my mother. To the woman who'd defined my entire existence as insufficient, who'd transformed my reliability into a flaw and my silence into pathology. You have a choice, I said. 2 options, actually. Option 1, you leave. 30 days. Pack your things, find a new place, build a life on foundations you've actually laid. I'll even help. First and last month's rent on an apartment that fits your actual budget. A fresh start. A chance to become the person you've pretended to be. And option 2? The words came out strangled, desperate. The voice of a woman who'd finally encountered a wall she couldn't charm her way through. Option 2, I said, is simpler. You stay. As my tenant. With a lease this time that you'll actually read. With terms, no subletting, no promises to Mark, no adding him to the deed, because the deed is mine and will remain mine. With rent, fair market value, no more discounts for family. And with rules, my rules. No book club without my approval. No redecorating without my consent. No performing ownership of a life that belongs to someone else. I paused. Let the words settle. Watched her face cycle through emotions I'd never seen her acknowledge. Fear, shame, the dawning understanding that her power had always been borrowed, her status leased, her security a fiction I'd authored and could end at will. 30 days, I repeated, or the lease. Your choice. But choose tonight. Because I'm done waiting. Done being practical. Done being the foundation you dance on while you take credit for the music. She didn't choose. Not then. The silence stretched, broken only by the muffled sounds of the party dissolving, guests edging toward doors, murmuring excuses, desperate to escape the wreckage of a performance they'd witnessed but didn't understand. Mark approached me, his face a complex map of emotions I'd never bothered to learn. "Ellie, I didn't know," she said. "I know what she said," I interrupted. "She's been saying things to both of us for 30 years, things that served her, that built her up, that made us compete for crumbs of attention while she ate the whole cake. I'm done competing, Mark. Done being the practical one while you're the charming one. Done with all of it." I turned, walked to the door. 40 people watched me go, and this time, for the first time, I wasn't invisible. I was the center, the gravity, the force that bent the room around me. At the door, I paused, looked back at my mother, still standing in the center of my living room, my chandelier illuminating her collapse, my wine giving her nothing. "One more thing," I said. "The moping you always complained about? It wasn't depression. It was observation. I was watching you, learning you, understanding exactly how you operated, how you extracted, how you performed love without ever feeling it. And now," I smiled, the expression that reached my eyes without warming them, the smile that said everything and nothing. "Now I'm using what I learned. Welcome to the next chapter, Mom. The one where you're not the star. You're just the tenant. And the rent is due on the 1st. I left. The door closed behind me with a sound like a period at the end of a very long sentence. The phone rang at 11 p.m. I didn't answer. It rang again at midnight, at 1 a.m., at 2:30. I didn't answer. I sat in my studio apartment, on my Murphy bed, and watched the numbers change on my phone, each call a confirmation that the boundary held, that the power had shifted, that I was finally, completely, irrevocably in control. At 3 a.m., the texts started. My mother's words, uncharacteristically unguarded, pouring out in a flood of desperation and rage, and something that might have been, in a person capable of such things, remorse. "You can't do this. I'm your mother. I've given you everything. Mark is devastated. You've destroyed him. Please, Eleanor. Please. I'll do anything." I read them without responding. Each message a confirmation, each plea a validation, each desperate attempt to reframe the narrative as my cruelty rather than her consequence. I saved them all. Screenshots to the cloud, evidence to the file, documentation of the woman who'd called me practical, now begging for my practical mercy. At 6 a.m., I sent one reply. "The lease is attached. Sign it or vacate by November 30th. No extensions, no negotiations, no performances. Your choice, Mom. For the first time in your life, actually your choice." I attached the document. The lease, fair market terms, no discounts for family. The lease that transformed her from queen to tenant, from owner to supplicant, from the center of gravity to a satellite in orbit around a power she'd never acknowledged. She didn't sign. Not immediately. For 3 days, she called, texted, sent messages through relatives I hadn't spoken to in years. She threatened legal action. "I'll sue you for elder abuse, for emotional distress, for everything." And I sent her the number of my attorney, the one who'd helped structure the LLC, who'd documented everything, who was waiting for exactly this call. She threatened to tell people, to ruin my reputation, to expose me as the daughter who evicted her own mother. I sent her the videographer I'd hired, the one who'd recorded everything, the footage of her speech, her dismissal, her collapse when the truth emerged. "Go ahead," I wrote. "Tell anyone you want. I have the recording." She threatened Mark, his grief, his devastation, his need for the home he was promised. I sent her his text, the one from 3 weeks ago, where he'd thanked me for understanding that Mom needed the house more, where he'd acknowledged that my practical nature meant I'd be fine anywhere. On the 4th day, she signed the lease, fair market terms, no discounts, no promises, no performances. She initialed every page, signed the final line, sent it back with a note that said only, "I hope you're happy." I wasn't happy. Not exactly. Happiness was a feeling I'd never learned to trust, an emotion my mother had always transformed into obligation, gratitude into debt, joy into performance. But I was something else. Something harder, more durable, more real. I was free. Mark called a week later. Not to apologize. He'd never learned how, had been raised by a woman who considered apology weakness and weakness the only unforgivable sin. He called to negotiate, to find angle, to discover if there was still something he could extract from the sister he'd dismissed. "She's not doing well," he said. "The apartment. It's small, Ellie. Dark. Not like the house. She's depressed. She's experiencing consequences," I interrupted. "Something neither of you has had much practice with. That's not fair. She raised us. She raised you," I corrected. "I raised myself. Paid for my own school, my own apartment, my own life, while she took credit for my reliability and gave you credit for existing. Don't lecture me about fairness, Mark. You don't know the word." He was silent, the silence of a man encountering a wall he couldn't charm his way through, a sister who'd stopped performing the role of practical enabler. "The house," he said finally. Could I maybe rent a room? Just temporarily, while I figure things out. Mom's lease is small, but I could help with. No." The word came out flat, final, without the hesitation I'd have felt a month ago, the need to justify, to explain, to make my boundaries palatable to people who'd never respected them. "No," I repeated. "You can't rent a room, you can't visit, you can't make promises about helping or figuring things out that you'll never keep. I've documented your promises, Mark. The texts, the emails, the 'I'll pay you back' that never happened. I don't need more evidence. I don't need more disappointment. I need space. From both of you. From all of it. Ellie." "Goodbye, Mark." I hung up. Blocked his number. Added it to the file, the documentation, the evidence of a family that had taken everything I offered and called it insufficient. The house was empty now. My mother had moved out over a weekend, a frantic packing job that left scuffs on my walls and scratches on my floors. She'd taken the "Live Laugh Love" sign, the watercolor prints, the inspirational quotes in distressed wood frames. I'd watched through security cameras I controlled from my phone, said nothing, did nothing, let her perform her departure without audience or validation. The scuffs remained, the scratches, the marks of her presence, her occupation, her temporary claim on a life that had always been mine. I left them. Reminders, evidence, proof of what I'd survived. I moved in 3 weeks later. Not to the master bedroom. That space held too much of her, her perfume, her performance, her claim on centrality. I took the guest room, the small space she'd reserved for visitors she wanted to impress, and made it my own. Painted the walls blue, my color, the shade of sky on clear mornings when the world felt possible. I kept the lease, my mother's signature, her initials, her acceptance of terms she'd never have agreed to if she'd had power, if she'd had choice, if she'd understood that the world she'd built was always resting on my shoulders. She lived in the apartment now. The dark one, the small one, the space that didn't fit her narrative of effortless elegance. She paid rent to a landlord who didn't know her name, who responded to maintenance requests with forms and delays, who treated her like what she'd always been, a tenant, not a queen. Sometimes I drove past. Not often, not obsessively. Just occasionally, on my way somewhere else, slowing to see if her light was on, if she was home, if she was surviving the consequences she'd never expected to face. She was. Always. The light was on, the curtains drawn, the performance continuing for an audience of none. She'd adapted, as people like her always do, finding new sources of validation, new mirrors to reflect the image she wanted to see. I didn't feel sorry for her. Didn't feel guilty, didn't feel the pull of obligation that had defined my entire childhood, my adolescence, The years of practical reliability that had made me invisible and necessary and completely taken for granted. I felt free. The word I'd searched for. The feeling I'd never trusted. The state of being that existed beyond gratitude and performance. And the endless negotiation of love as transaction. The house was mine. The life was mine. The key, finally and completely, was mine. And on the first of every month, when the rent payment arrived from my mother's account, on time, always on time, because she understood now that lateness had consequences, I smiled. Not cruelly, not triumphantly, just knowingly. The practical daughter, the reliable daughter, the daughter who'd paid for everything and deserved nothing. She'd built the foundation. She'd maintained the infrastructure. She'd waited, patiently, for the moment when the structure would reveal its true architect. And now, finally, completely, irrevocably, she was home.